This takes place around the 1960s through 70s. My grandfather lived in the city of Bratislava, the capital of Slovakia. Back then, it was in Czechoslovakia, and he had been training to become a doctor. He came home one evening with blood covering his hands. My grandmother was distressed, as she thought he got into a fight, but she later learned that was not the case. My grandfather was a fit man for most of his life, and worked until 75 through 76 years of age. Throughout his whole life, he went to work on foot and didn't have a car. These were prosperous times for Bratislava. There was a new hospital and a metro being built. Both were never finished and are now abandoned. In Bratislava, there are many forms of public transportation, these being trams and buses, and also a mix called the Trolejbus, trolley in English. It is basically a bus that is connected by spikes on the roof to cables above the road. These Trolejbuses are very good at getting up Bratislava's hills, but they have one major design flaw. Those rods on the roof fall off often, making the Trolejbus stop. This day my grandfather had been walking home from the medical institution he had worked at, and a Trolejbus had passed him. He says he can't remember all the details since he wasn't looking that way, but you can easily understand what happened. The Trolejbus had been going about 30 miles per hour, and a small Trabant, a East German car made from plastic, had been overtaking. As the rod detached from the cable, it fell off the roof and straight into the path of the car. As the bus lost power, it stopped abruptly, but the car continued. Maybe the driver couldn't see, or was distracted, but he didn't even try to stop. The pole went through his car windshield, through the guy's shoulder, through the front row of seats, as well as the second, and then out the back door, and only then did the car stop. Also, since the rod was at an angle, he was lifted off the seat and his head was hitting the car ceiling. When my granddad ran over, the man was already unconscious. My granddad checked to see if he had a pulse, and he did, and someone ran to call the police on a street phone 25 meters away. My granddad realized this man was losing a lot of blood, so he instructed another man to get into the passenger seat and to put the car in reverse. Now they were slowly driving the car back, with the pole coming out of the man. He didn't say much during this whole ordeal. The only thing he said was, "Kurva," which literally translates to whore, but basically means the English word fuck. At the end of the pole, there is a connector that is wider than the rest of the pole, and when it finally popped out, a lot of blood burst everywhere. They held the wound until the ambulance arrived, and the woman doctor took the driver to the hospital. My grandfather was a medical inventor, and didn't work at the hospital, but he heard from a friend that the guy had just narrowly avoided death. The horrible thing is that the Trolejbuses still drove around, and a couple of years later, a tram derailed in a pedestrian zone, killing many people. Yet the transportation system was still not improved. This began back in Halloween of 2008, when I was 13. My parents had been divorced for a while, and were dating other people. To say that my father and I had a complicated relationship at this time would be putting it lightly. I was due to move out of the state to where my mom was living with my stepfather in about 6 months or so from this time. My dad was dating this woman named Cheryl. It is worth mentioning at this point that my father had a reputation where we were for being a womanizer. My dad was friends with this couple, Brock and Haley, who had a child named Brittany, and I used to babysit for a few extra bucks. Haley and my father also worked together. Brittany was about a year old at this point. Brock and Haley were going to a Halloween party with my father and Cheryl. I was kind of a socially awkward kid, and didn't have many friends at this point, so I didn't mind that I was sacrificing my Halloween for a few extra bucks. This family paid me very well. They usually gave me about $20 an hour to babysit. Brittany was also very well behaved, and good at sleeping through the whole night. It was a very uneventful 5 hours, but Brittany slept all the way through that time, and I watched TV for the most part. Brock and Haley came home, and they were definitely squabbling about something. They were outside the front door, and were keeping their voices down as to not wake the baby. But I thought I heard my father's name mentioned. Haley was crying and went to the master bedroom, and Brock took me home. This was a pretty small town, and the ride was about 5 minutes or so. Brock said something to the effect of, "Tell your father to stop talking to my wife." I almost didn't catch it the first time, so I didn't remember what he said originally. I gave him kind of a confused look, and the grimace immediately came off of his face. He smiled and said, "Never mind. Thank you for watching Brittany." I walked up the path to my front door and knocked for my brother to let me in. My brother let me in, and I watched TV for a little while before going to bed. I had forgotten all about this for a long time. I would learn later that this Halloween night would be connected to a longer chain of events where my father was pursuing Haley. The story doesn't progress again until my 14th birthday, in April of 2009. At this point, my father had broken up with Cheryl around Christmas and had reunited with an ex-girlfriend named Samantha. I finally had a group of friends, just in time for me to move out of state in a month. They were all over for an overnight birthday party at my father's house. It was about 6 p.m. and the party was just getting started. All the guests were there and we were waiting for the pizza to come. I am a hungry teenage girl with a bunch of other hungry teenage girls, and the pizza man is the most anticipated guest at this point. The doorbell rings, and I run to the door to answer it, thinking it is the pizza man. Haley was standing at the door. Brock was not there, and I was surprised to see her there. My dad followed behind me and let her in. My dad sends all of us outside to wait for the pizza and eat, and he is having a conversation inside with Haley. I had forgotten to get drinks for everyone while we were inside, so I get everyone's request and head back inside for the garage fridge where all the soda is. This exterior door I just walked through connects straight to the kitchen, and the living room connects immediately to the kitchen. I have a direct line of sight into the living room from this point in the kitchen, and I can see my dad and Haley kissing in the living room. I thought it was definitely strange, considering that I didn't hear anything about a divorce or separation between Brock and Haley. I didn't even know about my father breaking up with Samantha again. I gather the drinks and sneak back outside. Neither of them seem to hear me go in or out. I give the drinks to my friends and the gossip begins. There was all sorts of speculation about what was going on. The length of their relationship has been a point of controversy among everyone for a long time. Some say that it began before that night, and some say that it began on this night. The news sources said that the divorce was filed about 6 days before the party was taking place. With my more adult perspective on the matter, I have a feeling that someone's first date or makeout session wouldn't likely happen during your daughter's birthday party. I personally believe that this may have been an extramarital affair on her part. Either way, she definitely didn't deserve what happened to her. My birthday party goes on. My dad is definitely doing something with her in the bedroom, which is just parallel to mine on the other side of the hall. I was very upset, considering he was doing this during one of the very few social gatherings I had in the middle of the school years. The controversy of the matter didn't occur to me yet. I was just upset he decided to do this at my birthday party. Haley was a regular fixture in the household not long after this. My father and I had countless fights over my birthday party. The fact that I was now subject to all the small town gossip about him was affecting my social life that I had, and the clandestine handling of this relationship. There were a few things that had tipped me off to the fact that things were somewhat off about all of this. Even though Brock knew where we lived, he never came to the house to pick up Brittany after Haley's days with her. Haley always had to drive into the middle of nowhere to get her and to drop her off. The communications were also closely monitored between them. My dad and her had whispered conversations about court decisions, and my dad seemed to be even more cautious and paranoid than normal. My father, at one point, explicitly stated that Brock was not allowed there. I moved out of the state in early July of 2009. My father and I had just had one of our biggest arguments after my brother's 11th birthday. I moved on that note, and it would be a month before we really spoke again. We were all in my mom's house, and I was getting settled in there. My siblings were due to go back home in the second week of August. I remember there were 3 days of whispered conversation among my mom and stepfather. My mom seemed pretty distraught about something. After 3 or 4 days of this, my dad just showed up unexpectedly one day. This was about a week before my siblings were due to go back home. In August 2009, Brock murdered Haley after holding her and Brittany hostage for a while. The police responded after Haley's roommate had called them. They had Haley give Brittany to them, and Brock ran up behind her and shot her. He then killed himself immediately after this. My father had tried to paint this as though it came out of left field. I mean, no one really expects to be murdered on any given day. But the news coverage began, and members of our family began to come forward with their own pieces of the puzzle, including myself about my birthday party and all of the drama and oddities of my home life at that point. There were some things we didn't find out until all of this happened. Brock had confronted Haley and my father at their workplace, threatening their lives around the same point as my birthday party. The domestic violence was so much worse, and had been going on for much longer than the rumors had suggested. Suddenly, all the strange events from Halloween 2008 until that point made sense, although not entirely, as some of this still remains a point of controversy to this day for some people in my family and some of the family friends. I'm an adult now, and I'm happy to say that my father and I have a better relationship. I have a husband of my own, and I can't imagine how it gets to the point for someone to where they would have to kill the person that they took their vows with. If you enjoyed this video, you know what to do. If you would like a chance to have your story featured in an upcoming video, make sure you check the description for information on how to submit your stories. I would also like to note that I can personally verify the second story. They made sure to include links to the news articles with their story, although they did ask me to hold those because they would like to remain anonymous. I hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you in the next video. And just remember, it's always scarier if it's true.